TitleMatchNetwork.com.
You touched about West Texas football.
Yeah.
And I guess you played there with John Ayers,
Yeah.
Tully Blanchard, and
Right.
Tito Santana.
Right.
What was that like?
It was great. I finished high school in Southern Arizona, a little town called Wilcox. And actually, I had signed a letter of intent to play college football at the University of Arizona. And was watching TV one afternoon. I hadn't seen the Funks or anybody in 3 years since my father's death. Wrestling comes on. You know, the tape out of Amarillo was in Arizona, and they were coming to Tucson. So I went down and visited Terry and Dory and Dory Sr. And actually, the first trip was Dory Jr. and his dad and Sr. And they said, Terry's coming next time. Come back and see us. So when I came back the next time, I was always closer to Terry. Terry was always like, whenever I was, as a kid, when we would go out to the Funk Ranch, Terry just always kind of took me under wing, just like my buddy. And it was Terry who suggested that I come back on a recruiting trip to WT. And I actually took the recruiting trip just thinking that I was going to go back and visit some old friends, But man, I got back around it. And that was the first time that I really realized how much I really wanted to be a wrestler. Because man, when I got around it again, I thought it was almost as if my mind shifted from football to wrestling. I still loved football.
You quit your senior year in football?
Yeah. No, I didn't do that. I didn't do it intentionally. I didn't do it. I didn't go in there knowing I'd do that.
Right.
And I'll get to that. But that's how I ended up at West Texas. I always had it in the back of my mind. And so I thought, well, don't put all your eggs in one basket. West Texas State had a tremendous reputation. It was a Division I school. They played good football. And I was going to be around some people that I was comfortable with and friends. And so I chose West Texas State and met John Ayers there. John came in as a college transfer. So did Tully. Tito Santana, whose real name is Merced Solis, was there from the very beginning. And matter of fact, I was kind of shocked. I'd already left college and been wrestling for a year or so when I found out that Merced he went to the Kansas City Chiefs and he got cut the last cut, and they even told him, you should be playing. And it was one of those deals where somebody that they had drafted higher, they were already paying more money,
right,
kind of deals. And so he went to Canada for a while, and they called him back, but he said, nah. And then I think through Tully, he got into business.
So he was a wrestling fan, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he was kind of a fan, but Tully's the one that really introduced him to the business. And then, of course, Tully was a quarterback on our football team. Tito was a tight end. And John, all through college, was a defensive lineman. And I was an offensive lineman. So John and I lined up in practice, every day, at some point in time against each other. So right. I can attest to John Ayers' football skill. He was a tough guy. Yeah, he's good, man. You could stand him up, but you could never move those big tree trunk legs of his.
Right. What was Tully like back then?
Tully was a dedicated. He's always been a dedicated athlete. Tully, was a good quarterback. But I always liked to. Once we got out of school and he was wrestling and I was wrestling, we did a deal where I was back in Texas wrestling for the Funks, and Tully was coming in and was going to wrestle. Was going to work with me.
Right.
And so I did this interview, and I thought it was great. I said, everybody knows that Tully Blanchard and Ted Dibiase played football together at West Texas State, and now two former teammates are going to go head-to-head in the ring. And I said, with all due respect to Tully Blanchard, my friend and former football teammate, said, it's two different games, though. I said, I'll tell you, Tully, I said, you're getting in over your head. I said, Tully set a lot of records at West Texas State, and one of them was most interceptions thrown in a single season. I said at one point, Tully was so distraught over throwing interceptions that he tried to commit suicide, but somebody intercepted the bullet.
That's good.
But no, Tully did a great job.
All right.
Yeah.
When you first got into the business, who were some of your mentors?
Oh, gosh.
I guess. Who helped train you?
Well, the Funks have mentored me all the way through my career.
Right.
Terry Funk, as wild and as crazy as he comes across in front of the camera, is about as sharp a guy as there is in our business. Terry Funk knows. Terry Funk predicted the direction that wrestling would take, and that wrestling would become a national phenomenon. When I was a college student, he told me step by step what would happen. I was just amazed when it all started happening. But Terry's always been, every major move that I've ever made in my career, even if I had my mind made up to do something, I always ran it by Terry just to make sure. But as far as training me, along with Dory and Terry Funk, Dick Murdoch. Dick Murdoch helped me get booked into the Mid-South Territory the very first time when Bill Watts, Cowboy Bill Watts, was then in part ownership with Leroy McGurk. And then again, he eventually bought out Leroy and took the whole company.
Right.
Bill Watts, in my years, I came into the business in 1975, and I came in. Dick Murdoch said, Ted, he says, you know what? If you really want to find out if you want to be in this business, he says, I tell you what, instead of just going and getting a regular summer job, why don't you come down to Louisiana and wrestle for the summer and go back? You see, because the NCAA had effectively changed the ruling where you could, receive payment in one sport, even though wrestling is not a legitimate sport, and keep your amateur status. Before that, even as a pro wrestler, I would have lost my amateur status I couldn't have played college football. So I said,
I think Tully was talking about that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, let's try this. And I said, it'll be a lot of fun, and I'll make better money than if I was working, and I'll learn the business.
Right.
Well, I should have never done that because I went down there, and I just loved it. From the very get-go. I had spent the previous summer in college refereeing, and so I had a good taste of and a good feel for the business already, and I grew up in it. And most of the guys that have grown up in the business, the second generation guys, are usually all pretty good,
Right.
Because they've got real hard for it. And I just took to it quick. But Dick Murdoch, in my mind, is probably one guy that will never ever really get the credit that he deserved, because he was great in the ring. He was tremendous. It was so effortless for Dick to go in the ring and have a great match. He would go in the ring and be clowning around.
Right.
He'd be clowning around with the guy he's working with,
Right.
and at the same time having the people in the crowd want to kill him.
Right.
He was just really great. Dick Murdoch, other guys that were in Mid-South or came through Mid-South. I was so lucky that because Watts had so many great wrestlers come through the Mid-South Territory. There's a guy whose style reminded me a lot of my dad's style, just his look. A guy named Bruiser Bob Sweetan.
Right.
Bob Sweetan was a tremendous heel. Rip Tyler came through, and oh my gosh, Danny Hodge was in there, and you want to think all these names now, you can't, they don't come to mind. But without a doubt, one of the biggest would be Killer Carl Cox. Carl Cox was another guy, and basically Carl, I think, mentored Murdoch as well. But the very first real angle I did with a main event wrestler was with Killer Carl Cox in the Mid-South Territory. And again, that was just, I was exposed to a lot of great talent very early in my career. And by being exposed to that great talent, that's where that's what I tell so many of the young guys in the business today. I said, you don't go to a school and learn to work. You go there and learn how to use the tools.
Right.
You learn how to take the bumps. You learn how to throw a punch. You learn how to kick. You learn how to do all the mechanics of business. but you don't really learn to work until you get in front of a live crowd and do it. It's an on-the-job training type of business. I remember the older guys telling me you have to learn to develop an ear for the people, and that used to drive me crazy. As a young guy, what do you mean? Well, you listen to the people, and you learn to have a feel for them, and then with that, you learn to know when it's time to shift gears and do something. And there's probably guys that wrestle today that watch this and go, "What's he talking about?" Because I see so many guys go in the dressing room and they will map out their match from bell to bell. We're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. I mean, they choreograph the entire match. I never do that. You would go in the ring, and the only thing you would know going into the ring is the finish. Right. That's it. And the rest, and you might say, okay, if it's a special situation, you might have something you're going to do right at the beginning. But man, everything in between was ad lib. And that's the feel for the business. You would call the match as you went, and the heel was always the guy in charge. Right. And that, sadly, is missing in the business today. It's just guys don't know how to do that. They just don't have that. And that's something that comes over time. It just comes with time. But Carl Cox, Dick Murdoch, Terry Funk, Dory Funk Jr., Jack and Jerry Briscoe, and without a doubt, Harley Race. Harley Race will always have a special place in my heart. Not only for how much he helped me, but for the fact that on the night of my father's death, he was the guy that ran to ringside and tried to save my dad's life. And,
he was Booker then, right?
Yeah, he was booking Emerald at the time. And when he was the world champion, I can remember sitting in a hotel room in Odessa, Texas, and him telling me, he said, "Kid, you got it." And he says, "I'm going to do all I can to help you get there." And I don't know how widely known that is, but there was a major campaign at one time. I mean, I was in line. I was expected at one time to be the next NWA world champion.
It's one of my questions. There's a big rumor going around.
Yeah.
Harley wouldn't, put the belt on you or something like that.
Harley wanted to. Both of the Funks wanted to. Bob Geigel wanted to. The politics of the business being what it is, I think that at the time, the other two names were Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair. And I think what they really wanted to do, because at that time that they would put that belt on somebody, and that one guy would carry that belt for like 2 or 3 years, right, or longer, before a new champion was named.
What year is this from?
This was like, this was the late 70s, late 70s, early 80s. And they were talking about doing like a 3-way deal where they would put it on Dusty for a while, and then maybe me, and then to Flair, and moving around between these 3 different guys and create a national story within the NWA,
right?
Centered around these 3 guys. But that's not the way it happened at all. And I don't know all the specifics. I just know that that Dusty campaigned for it. I was a young guy. Dusty'd been in the business a while. It's a lot of politics. Who you know, and whose door you're beating on, and whose ear you have. But I know that I went to Atlanta the very first time with the intention of getting the national exposure. That's what I was told. They said, go to Atlanta, get on TBS, and get that national exposure.
This was with Ole. Ole was
but what happened is when I came into Atlanta, right as I came in, Ole left, and I came in right on the tail end of the really great run that had just taken place there, and Ole left, and who was it that came in to book? Robert Fuller. And Robert was not a great booker. He was okay. But the thing is, I had just been exposed to some of the best.
All right.
You know, and even though I didn't have the skills to do it myself at the time, I could recognize when it wasn't being done right. And but see, Robert, you know, anytime a new booker comes in, he wants to bring his crew in. And I really wasn't part of Robert's crew. But at the time, Jim Barnett was the man in control in Atlanta. And basically Jim said, you push Dibiase. Well, the way that Robert pushed me was to align myself with him.
Right.
So he put me with him in like a tag situation instead of a single guy. And it really wasn't what it should have been or could have been. And at any rate, for a number of reasons, the strength of the Crockett territory, it got real big, and Jim Crockett got much more control. Ric Flair was his man. And Dusty also had been his man. And so the power, the belt went where the power was. And, you know, I've probably gone down in history as being the guy who made more champions than having been a champion.
Right.
And, but I mean, there's no regrets. I mean, would I have loved to have had the belt at some point in time? Yeah, sure. But, you know, the belt, when you really look at it, it's just a tool. You know, it doesn't really have that much significance within the framework of the business, other than a tool to be used to get this guy over, that guy over.